And you went on a journey to heal yourself.
Yes.
Tell me about that journey.
So in my 30s, this was a huge epiphany for me because I realized that I wasn't trained, I wasn't educated. Even though I had an outstanding education, I wasn't trained to help with this. No one taught me about cortisol problems and how to manage that. I mean, I was taught about the extremes of Cushing's disease, which is really high cortisol levels, and Addison's disease, which JFK had. And it's when your adrenals in your back above your kidneys don't make cortisol. So I was taught about the extremes, but I wasn't taught about all the people who kind of live in the middle with problems with their cortisol. So this is when I started to take the scientific literature and apply it to my situation because I wanted to feel better. I felt old before my time, and I had a lot of belly fat, and I was on this path of aging at an accelerated clip. So I did it to help myself, but then I also wanted to help my patients, and it felt like I needed to go deeper and understand what can we do to treat the trauma and also to treat the more proximal measurements that we're making, like with cortisol, with heart rate variability, with blood sugar.
So what was step one for you?
Step one was awareness.
Okay.
And I had no idea. These are not things that most doctors are checking for.
It's pretty crazy that you're a doctor, but you don't know this part of health. I mean, how are you going to help anybody if you don't fully understand health from a more sort of holistic perspective?
That's a critical point. So I was taught at Harvard that if you have blood sugar problems, if you've got prediabetes and diabetes, the treatment is lifestyle. It's the most effective to change the food that you're eating, to increase your exercise, to manage your stress in a different way. And yet I wasn't taught how to help my patients do any of those things. I was taught how to prescribe a medication for it, like metformin or some other treatment, but I wasn't taught how to do lifestyle medicine. I had 30 minutes on nutrition. So yes, it is pretty crazy.
They gave you 30 minutes on nutrition
Yes.
during which training?
This is medical school, and I got about the same amount on perimenopause and menopause.
Really? I mean, that explains a lot
Yes, it does.
about the medical system. So step one was awareness. What was step two?
Step two was, what does the science tell us? And if we take what the science tells us, usually applied to a population, that then sets us up for step three, which is N of 1 experiments.
Trying things on yourself and then measuring.
That's right.
When we think of cortisol, which was the first sort of marker that you saw was elevated, we think of stress. So we think we get cortisol if we're stressed. So my brain, my very naive brain said, well, you just need to be less stressed, Sarah. So you should just go on a holiday and then your cortisol will come down.
I used to think that too, and then I would come back from the holiday and I would still have cortisol problems. So stress is part of it, but cortisol is really interesting. These hormones that we're talking about, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, insulin, it's not a democracy. Like, they don't have equal footing. Cortisol is more like a dictator, especially if it's out of whack. So you need cortisol to live. Whereas you could live without testosterone, estrogen, progesterone. Can't live without insulin, but cortisol is critical in terms of helping you with your immune system, helping you with your blood sugar, and just managing the stress response. So it's not quite as simple as thinking your way out of a high cortisol or a low cortisol. And there are ways that your body can become stuck in a particular pattern of making too much cortisol or making not enough cortisol.
And if my body's making too much cortisol and my levels are too high, what is the harm?
The harm is it's associated with depression. It's about 50% of people with high cortisol, 50% of people with depression have high cortisol. It's used by some psychiatrists as a suicide marker. It's associated with more belly fat. And so the fat receptors, the fat cells in your belly have increased receptors for cortisol. So it's a way of growing your belly fat. We know that it shrinks the brain in women, but not men. Starting in midlife, starting in your 40s. It's not an old age thing. And this has been shown a couple of different ways. There was a study from the University of Texas in San Antonio showing that women in their 40s with high cortisol have a shrinkage of total brain volume. And then Lisa Mosconi at Cornell also just showed in a study looking at men and women that women with high cortisol also have shrinkage of their total brain volume. And they start to have a difficult time using glucose as fuel in their brain.
Which is going to result in what kind of behaviors?
Well, it makes you tired. It gives you slow brain energy. And I can tell for the most part you don't have that. But if you do have it, there's a way that your brain slows down, you feel foggy, you're not able to multitask and kind of keep up with everything.
Is there a link between cortisol and trauma?
Oh, yes.
What is that link?
So for people who experience toxic stress or trauma, what typically happens is cortisol goes up. That's part of the alarm,
Yeah.
the body's stress response. What we know is that for people who've got more serious exposure to trauma and they have post-traumatic stress disorder, those people have probably gone through a period of high cortisol and now they can't keep up anymore. And they are in a low cortisol state.
What are the things in the world at the moment that are messing up our hormones? Because the subject matter of hormones has become increasingly popular. And I know that there's hormones like cortisol, which we've talked about, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, insulin, glucose. What are the big things that are like messing up our hormones at the moment? If because I want to make sure my hormones are in check. So I'm a guy, and I'm sure that there's some of these hormones are more like things like estrogen have, I think, more pertinent to women. But
No, it's important for men
oh,
too.
really?
So estrogen and progesterone are incredibly important for men. And it's involved in bone strength. Progesterone's involved in sleep in men. So the levels are lower in men and your testosterone's about 10 times higher. But in women and men, they're all important. So what's messing with our hormones? I would say toxin exposure. So there's endocrine disruptors. There's more than 700 known endocrine disruptors, things like bisphenol A, um, like the plastic lining that you see in cans or in plastic containers, water containers. There's skincare products, which women are exposed to more, things like moisturizer and makeup and other things that contain um, endocrine disruptors like parabens and um, there's flame retardants that we get exposed to. So there's a whole class of endocrine disruptors. And then it feels right now like we are more dysregulated than I've ever seen. And I'm not sure what the cause is. I don't know if it's the post pandemic experience or part of what we're experiencing in the United States with the change in leadership. It just feels like there's this hum of dysregulation that I haven't seen over my career. Are you noticing that?
Are you seeing that in your patients? And
I see it in my patients. I see it in their wearable data. I see it in heart rate variability. I see it in the cortisol levels that I'm measuring.
you asked if I'm noticing that. I mean, the more digital the world has become, I think I've seen more dysregulation, and we're obviously moving further in that direction at rapid speed, especially with things like AI now and algorithms getting more smart and addictive.
Yes.
So I see that. Also, there's just been a change in I think the algorithms, the social media algorithms will compete with themselves to see who can hold you the most. And to do that, they have to kind of grab your attention. And the easiest ways to grab your attention is by showing you things that are probably dysregulating.
Yes. It's an attention economy. And the cost in that fight for attention is that often the nervous system becomes more dysregulated.
So if you had to come into my life and you had to optimize my life to make sure that all my hormones were in check, you would get rid of plastics and toxins from my everyday life, my bathroom, etc.
I'd look at your skincare, I'd look at your cleaning products, I'd look at your air quality. I'd probably install a couple of air filters if you don't have that. I'd wanna know about your stress because you're someone who performs at such a high level, and I would assume that you found the right level of stress, where it's not so little that you're not productive, but it's not to excess to the point that there's a cost to it physiologically.
Yeah. And then
And I'd wanna look at your food. I'd wanna know how much protein you're consuming. Are you getting the right amount of carbohydrates? Seems like you are. Are you utilizing those well? What's going on with the continuous glucose monitor? How are your nutrients? What's your vitamin D? Things like that.
you're a big fan of continuous glucose monitors, aren't you?
I am. I think it gives real-time feedback, immediate feedback on the food that you're eating. I've seen nothing else change behavior like a continuous glucose monitor.
And for anybody that doesn't know, it's the little patch you put on your arm and it tells you your blood sugar levels in real time, straight to your phone. Sugar. Is sugar the enemy?
I don't think sugar's the enemy. I think the enemy is the way that we eat it to excess, the way that we use it to change our emotional state. And we know people who have adverse childhood experiences, they're more likely to have disordered eating. They're more likely to have problems modulating the amount of sugar they consume.
When you're treating patients, do you focus heavily on their blood sugar levels?
Are we recording? 87% of people don't subscribe on the Clips channel.
Yeah.
Taking liberties. What? Just coming for free and then bouncing. What? 87%? 90% of people on the Clips channel don't subscribe.
That's what it says here.
So I've been doing all this for free. You've been consuming all these clips for free. Listen, we'll make a deal. I'm really going to make these clips amazing and you're in the Clips algorithm on our show. So can I ask a favor? Please, can you hit the subscribe button? If you've watched more than one before, how about that? If you've watched more than one, first one free, buy one, get one free. The second one, I'm going to have to ask you to subscribe. If this is the first time you've seen a clip on this channel, move along. You don't need to subscribe. But if you've seen one before, please do me a favor, help a guy out, hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much.